All right. Good morning. My name is Joe Grochmal. There we go. My name is Joe Grochmal. I'm with Kiewit. I'm the Director of Engineering for Green Hydrogen. What I want to talk about today is driving down the cost of green hydrogen facilities from a CapEx standpoint. So we see a lot of projects in the works, as Matt mentioned, going through the TRL levels, working through pre-feeds and feeds, but not a lot of projects getting through FID and actually happening. Largely because of the levelized cost of hydrogen, is higher than off-takers are willing to pay right now. And most of that's due to the cost of power. But the capital expenditure does play a part in that, so we need to focus on that as well too. When talking about the capital cost of a facility, I'm going to focus on the direct costs. We classify them into indirects and directs. So directs are things that are absolutely necessary to build the facility. It's the equipment, the materials, and the labor to do so. So on the electrolyzer side, you can see that's the dominant cost on the direct cost side, followed by engineered equipment. So by that, engineered equipment, I mean the auxiliaries, the cooling water system, the water treatment, the power distribution, all that other equipment that it takes to support the electrolyzers. Next, with permanent materials, that's steel, concrete, cable, wire, everything it takes to interconnect those components and support them. And then lastly, labor and supplies. That is the installation cost for your craft labor in the field to erect a facility. On top of that, we have the directs, about 25% of the cost added on top, and that's for your support staff to organize the craft, escalation contingency, G&A, and margin. So from here on, we'll really talk about the direct cost because the indirects will come down, they'll scale with the directs. Categorizing those four direct buckets, we have some points here, opportunities to reduce the cost of each one of those. On the electrolyzer side, I've got some high-level bullet points here, but I'm not going to go deep into that because there are a number of people here, industry experts with electrolyzers, that know better than I do about how to drive down the cost of the electrolyzers. In general, though, some of the bullet points that we're seeing, increase the capacity of the electrolyzers, make them bigger, smaller footprint. Reducing redundancy of components associated with the electrolyzers. If you're providing a package, how do you take some of those components that are included with it, consolidate them, and deliver those at a lower cost? Less precious metals, really relevant to the PEM. Mass manufacturing, it seems like everybody's chasing a gigawatt factory, so they're after that. And then the new technologies that are coming too, that'll lower the water requirements or be more efficient as well too, will help with that CapEx. Moving on to engineered equipment. Reducing the redundancy is something that is a pretty easy low-hanging fruit one to go after. A lot of what we see is kind of over-spec'd. It'll come from an engineering firm with a really mature engineering group with standards, whether it's utility or a large oil and gas player, and their out-of-the-box specs are quite a bit overkill from a redundancy standpoint, but also the kind of gold plating within there. And trying to roll some of those back to be more reflective of the cost we're trying to achieve here. So allowing vendors to provide equipment, the packages that they're used to providing in the way that their lowest cost solution rather than implementing a gold plating spec on there and driving up the cost. Also, you see it on the back end when it comes to supporting that equipment in the field. If you have something custom out there, it's going to be more expensive to get a replacement part versus an off-the-shelf piece that you have. On the redundancy side, we see on the electrical, you'll have a single feeder coming into the facility, but they'll have a bunch of redundant transformers and switchgear. Well, there's not much point to that if you've only got one feed coming in to begin with. So those are things that we see we can help advise clients with. Expanding your pool of vendors that you're pulling from. Global sourcing, co-locating your facility with the off-taker, and also infrastructure that's currently existing, whether it's an existing water treatment system or a fire protection system, a control room, a warehouse, all of those things that you can take off of your project because they already exist, lower that CapEx. Reasonable design conditions and margin review sort of go together to make sure you're not over-speccing equipment. You want a reliable facility, but it cannot be designed for the extreme hottest day or the extreme coldest day. There has to be a happy medium in between. And same thing with margin review. Performance of your facility is critical, but implementing a too strict of a penalty on underperformance can really drive margin on top of margin, and then you get this oversized equipment, and you've driven up the cost of your facility unnecessarily. Moving on to permanent materials. The biggest impact that we see is having to do with quantities. For an EPC going to build something, the amount of things we need to install and the amount of, whether it's pipe, cable, or equipment, really drives our cost. So if you can just do less in the field is really the key. We do this with site arrangement and compressing the site together, putting your components closer together, really challenging the setback distances, but respecting them to reduce the amount of interconnecting quantities there. Another large cost driver that we see is with buildings. The buildings around these electrolyzers can become a Frankenstein of a design because you have to have proper ventilation, you have to have proper safety in there. If you design them for extreme hot or cold temperatures, that equipment gets really large. Trying to utilize natural ventilation or coming up with modular designs that really accommodate those extreme conditions, but largely get rid of the huge building cost would be really impactful to the CapEx side. Using more undergrounds, so a lot of oil and gas, out of the box, what they do is kind of above ground at refineries and whatnot. And from our standpoint, if we can push things underground, utilities, cooling water systems, it allows you to compress the site a little bit more. Your unit rates for installing those quantities are better. It moves hours in the schedule. Rather than having a peak schedule in the right, you can move those hours left and flatten your manpower schedule so you're not trying to pay overtime to attract that craft. It also improves access on your facility as an end user, just to have more buried. Lower cost materials, really getting something that's fit for purpose, that you're not having stainless when a carbon would do, or exotic alloy or something like that in a tank. Lastly, as we get to these larger scale facilities and the footprint starts to get really big, looking at going vertical. There's definitely design challenges associated with that, but it's something that we can engineer and we can overcome to really compress those sites further. The last one I'll touch on here is labor and supplies. As I mentioned, quantities drive everything. The fewer quantities you have, the fewer hours you have to install things. Increased modularization is one way to do that. Moving things off-site where labor is expensive. So if we can make mega modules and ship them to a site, in a union facility or up in Canada, we can really undercut the cost of labor to install those in the field. And some of those locations, the schedule doesn't allow you to work 12 months out of the year. So you can improve your schedule by using modular approach. Constructability reviews really goes along with cost-effective methods, and that's really what we specialize in, is starting with the end in mind. You can have a great design on paper, but if it's expensive to build, your project isn't going to make it through. So starting with that in mind, building that input into the design early, can really save you money. And that's really what my last slide is focused on, is early contractor involvement. The sooner you can provide that input, the less impactful it is. So engage the contractor early, and we can do a lot to improve the capital cost of your facility early on in the project. So we're over at booth 22. Feel free to come on by. Happy to talk to you about your projects. So thank you.